Welcome back to Insights. Last week, we looked at a different angle in terms of how God and why he brings shakings to nations. We looked at that it's one way that oppression is thrown off of God's people, righteousness goes forth, and people can walk in freedom. So people, as it says in Psalm 67, they're actually glad that God was judging the nations, as well as Isaiah said in chapters 26, that he was longing for God to send judgment which would teach the peoples of the earth righteousness. Great stuff. This week we want to take a little bit different angle on this in terms of how would you know if a nation has crossed a line in terms of God deciding that he is indeed going to send judgment. Well, we get a window into this from Jeremiah chapter 19, and I encourage you to read the whole chapter. However, here I'm just going to be focusing on verses 4 and 5. And it shows us 4 areas where the southern kingdom of Israel, before they were judged, that they had violated God's will in his ways. The first area it talks about is forsaking the one true God. Secondly, it talks about chasing after other gods. Third, it talks about the shedding of innocent blood. And I want to just touch on those. And then there's this idea of the nation becoming an alien place that I want to conclude with. First, the idea of forsaking the one true God. If you read American church history or American history in general, you will see the potent force that Christianity was. You will see how the people, not everybody were Christians, of course, but how the people had that Judeo-Christian ethic and how different this nation is today as we entertain all kinds of anti-biblical thoughts, philosophies, behaviors. Secondly, it talks about chasing other gods. Back then, much more obvious in terms of actual idol worship, physical idols, but still in our culture today, we have the worship of money, the almighty dollar, materialism. We also have the worship of self-gratification through any and every sexual expression that we can think of. We have all kinds of things where we're either worshiping self or worshiping mankind and our intellect, our humanism, and so forth. And we have shifted towards these other kinds of idols. And then third, it talks about the shedding of innocent blood. Just last week, there was another school shooting that took 17 lives. And of course, that is a type of shedding of innocent blood. And it shows us how God, because we have not followed him from our hearts and his will and ways, how he's been removing his protection. Or maybe I can put it this way, we just don't have the protection of Almighty God that we once had on our culture. But also we don't want to forget that since 1973, as a nation, we're responsible for almost 60 million abortions, the shedding of innocent blood. And when I say that, I don't mean that in a political way. I mean the demand of the people of this nation is for these abortions. Whether it's legal or not, if there was not this demand, which is reflecting the heart of the people, there would not be such a enormous number of abortions. And then we can look at those 3 areas, but also, and this comes out a little bit more clearly in the NASB, but it's there in the other versions as well, is that the nation itself just becomes an alien place. Now, what does Jeremiah mean, or God mean, by an alien place? It means that it's become unrecognizable to him. And that, in summary, is why God would send judgment to a nation. As I look back on our nation, the difference between our nation 2 generations ago and now, it is almost unrecognizable, whether you look at sexual mores or the drug culture or various things that take place in government or just simply the entertainment-based hunger of our culture. It's just about unrecognizable. So we need to cry out for mercy for our nation. And you may remember that in 2011, I've talked about this on a previous video, that in a prayer time, God just really revealed to me that our nation indeed has crossed a line. Let's cry out for mercy for our nation, but let's be discerning. Let's understand through the biblical lens where our nation is and the serious nature of the day and hour. We'll see you next week on Insights.